Hello and welcome to another episode of Historic Hindsight. I'm John, that's Tom, and today we're going to talk about cultural appropriation.
That's right, Johnny. Cultural appropriation, and for the first time in our episode's history, you are decked out in appropriate gear, and I'm not.
Well, I mean, sort of appropriate. It's at least of Asian origin.
Yeah. I don't have anything. I don't have anything. I don't even have an Asian firearm. I have nothing of Asian.
Now that can't be true because I've seen The Last Samurai and they use guns. Surely you have.
I have
some of that.
They actually, I believe in Last Samurai they were using.
Was it
Springfield? Yeah, I think that might have been one of the ones that they had in the movie. Which so we're going to be talking about the history of the samurai. This is actually going to be a multi-part a series. So stay tuned. We're just going to talk about.
Do they have a lot of history or something? Or
they do. They
go back a ways.
It's amazing how old cultures are. The United States and its like little 200-year history, and well, the samurai were around for about 1,000. So
holy cow. Just the samurai were around
just
for 1,000 years.
Just about,
Jeez.
yeah. Just
so
about.
Does that
actually a little bit more?
What I have heard of once referred to as feudal Japan? Is that
feudal? Yeah, feudal Japan. We're way back. We're going to talk about the origins and where the samurai come from, and this all comes from the fact that when I had COVID a few months ago, I played a lot of Ghost of Tsushima and was like, "Yeah, this is awesome," and then watched
samurai are dope.
Then watched the movie, Last Samurai, and was like, yeah, samurai are dope.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, this is not at all what this was.
Wait,
like, at all.
Wait, what do you mean? Hold up. What do you mean? The Last Samurai, I can understand would lie to us, but Ghost of Tsushima, that was supposed to be like a historical based game, right?
Yeah, but it's based.
I mean, it's not
history,
like
but it's
obviously not a historical story or anything.
Oh, and then the Shogun Total War, the Shogun Total Wars, I've been playing a lot of that too. So a lot of video games, a lot of it not at all accurate. Let's just go into it. If you're not familiar with what the samurai are, they are the Knights of the East, the writers of the Code of Bushido, the honorable warrior social class that never did anything wrong, mythical beings of godlyhood, or well, really just shit human beings like we all are, because we're all humans.
That was the ninjas. The ninjas were the bad guys. The samurai were the good guys. Assassins versus good guys. Essentially, cops, right?
Basically,
Samurai were, and they protected and held order. I mean, they can't have been that bad if they were around for 1,000 years.
Yeah,
nothing bad lasts that long.
Nothing bad lasts that long. So the origins of the samurai go all the way back to the rise in the 7th century, sort of. So back in the mid 7th century, so 600s, yeah. So back in the mid 600s, China and Korea were at war with what is now Korea. Area was at war with Japan, and like many wars, you begin to look at your enemies in their ways of doing things as a little bit of that actually works for them. Maybe we need to start adopting what they're doing because clearly they're kicking our ass.
You learn as you go, and like being exposed to any new culture, you're going to be exposed to new ideas, whether it's friendly or fighting. You're still getting new ideas.
You're getting new ideas. Ultimately, and I'm going to be jumping through a lot of history, so just bear with me.
So this is not a deep dive. We're skimming.
Ultimately, Japan is going to win this war against China, and by win I mean prevent the Chinese from completely taking over Japan.
Yeah, which is not that difficult to do, I would imagine. They're on an island.
It's an island. Yeah, you're an island.
Like at a time when. Boats existed, but they weren't
not
crazy
the easiest,
warships like we had now, where they could bombard the coast with cannon fire.
Yeah, not existing in the 600s. So in 663, Japan roughly wins this war, but not before Emperor Nakanoe issues his edict on 646, allowing the Japanese aristocracy to model their existence off the Tang dynasty, allowing for a sort of feudal-like ruling state. So basically, the emperor has control over Japan as a whole, but the little city-states day-to-day operations are more like what you would see in the Tang Dynasty in China, and of course in feudal Europe. So more like that pseudo-feudal system.
It's like kind of like the prerequisite or before like governorship and stuff like that. Basically,
you have land. You have landowners or substantial large landowners that control a city-state, and then that city-state is controlled by them as opposed to directly overseen by the emperor himself. And then once the war is completely over, by 702, the Tahoe Code, that's Taiho. I'm going to butcher all this language.
Yeah, that's definitely
Japanese.
not how you pronounce it.
Taiho Code, that essentially mandates that regularly reported census data is collected and would conscript about 25% of the male population into the standing army. So these men would be compensated by not having to pay taxes. So you have to fight, but you don't have to pay taxes.
So sort of a paid army, not quite.
Yeah. They're not actually getting paid. They just don't have to pay taxes.
Okay, and
but
so
they have to. They have
just
to be called up to fight if the need does arise.
Now, is this just to get additional men into the army, or is this?
Yes, this is very much
thing, or because obviously they had armies before that, but they didn't have this.
Yeah,
it was volunteer based or
well, as much as you could have a volunteer.
Yeah.
This is a way that, again, it's like the Tang Dynasty. The large army that China was able to have is because they basically had conscripted soldiers, and so this is Japan following that line of reasoning. Mm-hmm. And this starts to develop into what's called a class system that's separated into 12 classes, one being the direct advisors. 12 classes.
Oh, man, we got like 3 now in the U.S.
Yeah, level 1 is the like, not the emperor, but like his immediate advisors, his immediate like people that have tea and crumpets with him, so to speak. Top of the top. All the way down to level 6. These are your first, that's your first good chunk of people. From 6 down, you get what's called the servant class, which is also the word samurai starts to develop from that word servant. So these 6 lower classes actually that's where the word samurai kind of develops from. Is to explain these classes that are more like the civil servants. So these are like your low-level bureaucrats, tax collectors, farmers, not military fighting men, but what you have to have for a government to function, but not your elite politicians.
Now the people controlling, but all the stuff to provide for them and to provide, basically to create a society and have an economy of some sort.
Yeah,
that's what
exactly.
That's what the lower 6 classes did. They're the backbone.
And so your term samurai actually develops from this early social class order of people. Over the 8th and 9th century, what is known as the Hen Period, Japan was essentially split between the North and the South, with the South being the region of imperial control, and the North being the region of, wild men. They were called the Emishi, which literally means hairy people, so...
But
Johnny, you're the Emishi. Yeah.
And so I imagine Northern Japan's mountainous, correct?
I would sure.
I think
I have no idea. I think so, but I have no idea.
Just based on my talking to our friend who studied abroad, I believe the northern portion of Japan is where the mountains are in Japan, which would lead to hair on the descendants of that area for sure. Which would make sense.
For sure, yeah. So over the 8th and 9th century, they're split into 2. So as the imperial Japan tries to model itself more and more after the Chinese Tang Dynasty, they start wielding heavy infantry. So you've got your conscripted soldiers, instead of just being poor farmers, are now actually becoming more and more trained soldiers, and they're going to be given armor. They're going to be given long spears, what we call spears, but they had another word for it. And they're very much modeled after China. So not swords, not archery, speared formations, very much like
more Roman almost.
Yeah, Roman and Greece and kind of that line of thinking for us.
So instead of individuals battling individuals, now it's a combined army that is going to move as a unit together instead of a bunch of individuals going and having a brawl, basically, with swords to chop off people's arms and heads. But.
Now, at this time, Japan's controlled by Emperor Kanmu, who seeks to expand into the north, into the Emishi region, and they are actually primarily fighting from horseback using bows and arrows. Needless to say, the first encounters with the Emishi do not go in the favor of Japan, because, bows and arrows hitting you from a far distance away does real good at killing you, a lot better than the spear that you gotta have to be at least within a certain distance from each other.
Yeah, ranged weapons are a tactical
ranged weapons
advantage,
are a thing.
It turns out.
Yeah, they very much are. So as the Heian continue to basically have these border skirmishes with the Emishi, they start to slowly assimilate the Emishi tactics and the Emishi people into their ranks as they take over territory.
Which is how you take over territory successfully. You take a little bit of their stuff and say, oh, yeah, you can keep doing that. and we'll start doing it too, and then we won't kill you.
Yes, very, very much. Well, at least they adopt most of them. Most of them, and they do eventually assimilate the Amishi into the larger imperial fold. And by assimilate, I mean they're beating them into submission,
force
over
them
the course
into
of
basically slave soldiers.
Over the course of 2 centuries. This is again, like I said, 8th and 9th century. This is what is happening.
Yeah, that's time to. I mean, you're completely brainwashing and abolishing a culture at that point. I assume it's a form of genocide at that point, right? I mean, you're getting rid of their culture, assimilating some of it, sure,
or appropriating what you want, because what they do is they take these Amishi tactics and they do play a large role in the development of the samurai as we know them, and the samurai spirit is said to be the ghost of Amishi. So if you go if you look at a lot of original Japanese writings, they talk about the ghost of Amishi, which is like the samurai spirit, which basically is, we really like the idea of bows and arrows and fighting from afar. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and adopt that, because that works really well. Like that.
May we please have your bows and arrows and teach us how to use them?
So myth crush number 1 against the samurai is that the early samurai weren't katana-wielding armored knights at all, but more Mongolian horse archers. And spoiler, that was actually the mainstay for the samurai until boom boom sticks became invented. And then, despite what the last samurai wants to tell you, boom boom sticks were actually a primary weapon of the samurai for a long time.
So they didn't have their masterfully folded blades and however many times they had to fold it to get the perfect Japanese steel at the beginning.
Yeah.
So
not at the beginning of,
shortly after them.
Well, we'll get there eventually, Johnny. You're jumping way ahead on us, but eventually we'll get there.
No, this is iconic. Promise. This is what a samurai is like. This is their thing. I mean, not this one. This is a flea market version. I'm missing a ruby on it. It's not that, but like with the wraps and everything that they had, like that's samurai.
Yeah, we'll get there.
All right, so we got a bunch of horseback riding, archer, Mongolian wannabes, essentially.
Yes, and they do also in
the north of Japan, right?
Yeah, and their other primary fighting style is spear.
Now,
so spear.
But Japan was still able to move in and take over territory.
Yes,
I imagine that's just sheer force and numbers.
There's a lot of it's a sheer force, and as they adopt the tactics, they've got a larger army. You adopt their enemy's tactics, and eventually you just win over through attrition. At the end of the 8th century, as the Hen Period begins to take control of the entire island of Japan, they implement the semi-feudal states where clan leaders and warlords would rule the territories to ensure law and order over the Amishi. So, as they take it, that's where the military is. Yeah, military police. Yeah.
And that's what they evolve into.
Yes. So as the Amishi that get folded in, their cultures, them as a people get folded in. The ones that were like, all right, we'll be loyal to the Imperial Japan. Don't kill me. We'll be him. Yeah. The Emperor of Japan actually likes the Amishi and likes their fighting style, and the ones that will promise to be loyal, he uses them to suppress rebellions in the regions in the north that are still under, not under control.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that makes sense.
And that's where the term samurai, as we know it, really gets drafted into the vernacular to discuss the fighting Amishi countrymen. Basically what it is when before it was just servant. Now it becomes the fighting servants that are actually fighting against the uprising of the peasants, and it's to distinguish the noble class. I use that term noble because I'm white and European.
Yeah, to help all of our white watchers understand what's going on here, because let's be honest.
The term samurai is used to distinguish the aristocrat class, basically, from the peasant fighting class.
Yeah.
Not that the samurai were peasants. I mean, they slightly above that, but not really. So the emperor favored, like I said, he favored the Amishi and the early, basically what became the early samurai to suppress these rebellions, and continued to call them the fighting force to suppress or to supplement his main army. So anytime that Japan would be threatened by outside forces, he'd call up the Amishi or the early samurai and, hey, we need your help, and they would take over.
So they're kind of like a militia group almost, where
they become mercenaries.
Yeah,
they become hired hands.
Mercenaries. Yeah. So money for swords for hire, or in this case, bows and arrows for hire.
Yeah, exactly. And so as the Heian period comes to an end, the emperor becomes less and less interested in actually ruling Japan and starts to delegate more and more powers to the ruling landowners / warlords, who by the 10th century earned the name the Daimyo. Daimyo?
Daimyos?
Daimyo. Yeah, that's the one. And who would the daimyos turn to for assistance in keeping law and order in their areas? Well, the mercenary Mishi samurai, because they know how to fight.
So the emperor
They're
got
fighting
tired.
people.
So the emperor got tired of micromanaging, left it to city-states, much like lordships and things like that in Europe. And then they needed somebody to enforce their rule, and so you pay a group of warriors who have been fighting for hundreds of years. At this point, right?
Yes, and they're willing.
Yeah, they'll do whatever you want
because they're getting paid.
Kill them.
That's their job. Yeah, that's their job. They're getting paid for that. That's their job. The emperor actually almost entirely voluntarily gives up his power to the daimyo, which human nature takes over for the daimyo, and they begin infighting with each other.
He gave up the power. He didn't just say, "Do what I want you to do." He said, "You can." Do basic kind of what you want, and then if you go overboard, obviously I'm gonna come and behead you all.
Maybe he just gives up too much power because he's just not interested in ruling. Several generations several generations of emperors are like, screw it. You get one spoiled kid who gets another spoiled kid who gets another spoiled kid. By the fourth spoiled kid, he's like, I don't need to do anything.
Yeah, you can only force them into that kind of leader mind state for so many generations.
And it doesn't take long for these daimyo leaders to start infighting with each other and then start infighting with the emperor for more and more control.
Just trying to get more land, right?
They're like, human nature.
My city's doing really well. We need more room for houses or whatever. Or look, you're neighboring and you have houses.
He's got more money. Yeah, he's got more money than I do, and I want more money, so I'm going to take that. You want houses? It's stuff. Yeah. People always want stuff.
More things, yeah.
Everybody wants more things. So this leads to a series of rebellions, the first one being the Hojin Rebellion, which solidifies the daimyo as a ruling class and gave military power to the samurai. Basically, the emperor still is there. He's still the figurehead over the whole country, but he doesn't actually have real power at this point. It's the ruling class daimyo.
Queen right now, like type.
Sort of, yeah.
Not quite, but a symbolic leader. But he doesn't have control. Like if he wanted to do something, he wasn't going to be able to do it because they would have just been nope.
Think of it as like a puppet king, like a king that's there that still he's still king, but like everybody knows he doesn't really
have power.
He's not really making any decisions.
Yeah, people can say no to him, and that's gonna work.
That's gonna work. At this point, after the Hojin Rebellion, there's basically two large samurai class families that are use that term loosely. Families, they're not families, but
gangs.
Two large samurai gangs, right? that wind up turning on each other and fighting each other in the Heiji Rebellion of 1160. The end result of the Heiji Rebellion is that one of the samurai wins, and you get what's called the first shogun, which is the Kamakura shogunate. A shogunate is basically a really, really influential, powerful samurai. He rises up to become the leader of samurai in general.
Yeah.
He becomes a shogunate, and that shogunate class, that military class of samurai, basically controls the day-to-day operations, the police operations of the country of Japan. While the emperor isn't really doing anything, but the emperor still always
exists.
There. The emperor never goes away, but it's really the shogunate that
puttering
has
around on his property at this point, just kind of walking around, and they're giving him his tea and his treasures from the west and everything, and just letting him exist while the shogun and everything else kind of run shit.
Yes.
Essentially.
The shogunate, the Kamakura shogunate begins. It's the first shogunate, and underneath the first shogunate, the Kamakura, the samurai become as a complete mercenary force, police force. And they even have fun laws where they can kill anyone beneath their status at any point for any reason if they slightly perceive them to be doing anything against the daimyo. So the samurai, to put it in perspective, you've got the samurai who are the police force.
Yep.
They're controlled by the landlords and the daimyo.
Can't kill them.
And this is where the whole, and I'm going to use this really loosely. Bushido starts to get developed. The term Bushido
Bushido
doesn't exist yet. It won't exist for millennia, and in reality, we're not really entirely sure how. Like, this was never really written down.
Yeah, and Bushido is basically it's a code of conduct for the samurai, is what it is.
Yes, but it's not like the chivalric the chivalry codes of our knights that were actually written down, that we have tangible pieces of documents for over courses of different nations and years. Bushido is like one or two pieces of writing on that, and that's about it. And it's way after this is all started.
But to be fair, many more writings may have existed and then been burned
it could have been destroyed. Yeah,
opposing
it could have.
Whole lot of war going on in Asia over the last thousands of years.
But in general, the samurai, the whole honor, all that stuff, that's more of a golden age samurai thing that develops. At this beginning phase, that doesn't exist.
Now,
the beginning phase,
now when
the code of
they can kill anybody under their class. Their class, they weren't bottom.
High. No, they weren't bottom. They were like middle. This is like your bureaucrats.
So basically, this was rich people saying, yes, I will allow the military, police, the enforcers, whatever you want to call them, to kill poor people if they want to, because I don't give a shit about them. If they just say, I killed him because he said a bad thing about the emperor or you or whatever, totally fine. You can do that. Thank you. Got rid of a problem for me.
Kind of sounds like the LAPD. In any case, that bad joke go over. Yes, samurai military. Samurai military police. Yes, military police keeping law and order. The Bushido at this point, if there is a Bushido,
I think,
simply Bushido, whatever. Yeah. If there is, it is simply just you are going to listen to the Daimyo, and that's it. Like your duty is to your lord. So with that said, there are good lords and there are bad lords. So naturally, if you have a bad lord, your samurai are going to be pretty shit human beings. If you have a good lord, your samurai could potentially have that ability to be good human beings.
At least be allowed to be a shit human being. I mean, because even if even if there's a bad apple at the top, there could be somebody with some compassion and empathy in the ranks. But they would be allowed to take any power-hungry trip they got and do whatever they wanted.
Very, very much so. And this comes up to my next idea of some of the myths that the samurai develop. And like I said out of the beginning, they're not this honorable thing. Not that they're dishonorable, but they're not necessarily honorable.
Right. They're not basing their entire existence on we are honor.
No, it is duty to the person who's paying me, which
mercenary.
And if at any point in time the daimyo doesn't like that group of samurai or that particular samurai, he stops paying them. And then the samurai become ronin, which is basically just a mercenary for hire who doesn't have a job. And what do trained soldiers who don't have a job and no source of income do? Oh yeah, they go rape and pillage because, Yeah,
I would guess. I don't know, but I would imagine at some point too, throughout these many hundreds of years, there was a point where the person in charge didn't have the money to pay their samurai,
that happens.
And I would imagine the samurai got pretty pissed off and maybe killed him. Just guessing it happened. I'm guessing that happened at least once.
It probably did. And then brings me up to another myth that develops is that they're not a race of people. They're not a specific you're not genetically samurai. You're not born to be samurai necessarily. Now, granted, most the samurai culture stuck together, and then of course, when you have kids, you're going to train them from a young age to.
Okay, but that's no different than military families today.
Exactly.
If your father or mother is in the military, you're probably more likely to join into the military, especially if they find a whole lot of pride and honor in what they're doing. They're going to speak that up, and they're going to talk about it a lot, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's the thing that I want to do.
What I'm going to do. Very much so. But to drive the point home that the race wasn't nothing to do with it, the whole Last Samurai with a white man becoming a samurai, and everybody's like, that's not right. That actually happened.
A lot.
There was a freed African slave. Yeah, there was a freed African slave who went to Japan with his master, ran away from his master, and became a very famous, successful samurai. Yeah. It wasn't something that
it's a martial.
You're a mercenary. It's a job.
Art training regimen, basically. That if you go in and you do the training, you reach, you learn the certain things, then it's probably a more complicated cop test, basically.
Yeah, kind of.
Except except back then it wasn't just like target shooting. It was you had to learn martial arts and you had to do the weapons and everything else. And it was a little more of a lifestyle, but essentially the same type.
I'm not trying to. It is very much a lifestyle. I mean, they are training
24/7. Like you live
this is your job,
but an outsider can come in and live the life of a samurai and become samurai. Is what
very much so. Very much so. So now, during this first shogunate, during the Kamakura era of Japan, they did become under attack by China / the Huns. Again, it's Huns, but it's the China region. And this actually happens twice, and is the inspiration for the Ghost of Tsushima game.
Oh, this is okay. So this is where you started getting into it.
Yeah,
but which uses all.
Yeah, it uses all the stereotypes of the samurai, and in the game you learn how to fight with a katana, and you stab people with katanas, and you're all about like individual fight-on-fight duels with honor, and there's seppuku, and they're like, I dishonored myself, so I gotta all that shit.
And then they chop. Do they do the chop? They chop.
The chop in the head. Yeah, all that stuff.
Okay,
yeah,
and now about that,
like,
the person who was chopping the head had to be trained too, because they did. If they chopped the head all the way off, that was dishonorable.
Yeah, you can't.
You had to chop down just to right there, so that it just went down, and then they.
Fun fact about that. This was actually going to come up with the next episode, but since we're talking about it, that was actually more. So if you were caught, if you're a samurai soldier and you're caught by an enemy, and you choose that path out, then your family was able to inherit all of your land, worldly possessions, all that stuff.
If you kept your honor.
If you took that path out. If you let yourself be executed by your enemy, then your family got nothing. So really, this wasn't more so much as like honor. As much as at least my family's got.
Don't want my family
to die. Exactly. And it wasn't something like samurai retreated. This wasn't like, oh, you cannot retreat. No, samurai very much retreated. They're an army. They very much retreated. It wasn't like, oh, you lost the battle, you got to commit.
Harry,
none of that. Whatever. Yeah, whatever. None of that. That comes out of the dawn, like when modern era looks back at the samurai and glorifies it to what it wasn't.
Yeah, that becomes part of the myth involved.
Which we'll get into in later episodes when we talk about Imperial Japan, the World War II era Imperial Japan that went way crazy based on that never existed and then took it to a different, more literal stance. But in any case, jumping ahead. They get invaded by the Huns. In reality, during both of these invasions of the Yuan Empire in China under the Kublai Khan, one of the
nailed it
fucking descendants of Genghis Khan, we'll just call him Khan, doesn't matter. The samurai employed unconventional tactics, including sabotage. So there's that whole honor thing thrown right out the window. We're like, in the whole video game, you're like, you cannot poison your enemy. That's dishonorable. And the shogunate dislikes you, and you have to like leave being a samurai. It's the get it. It's a brilliant game. I love the game, but it's not a realistic story.
But that's what we do with history. We romanticize these wars and these battles and everything that happened, and we like to think that they're all these just heroes that were fighting honorably and stuff, but they were just people that were trying to stay alive.
So during the first Mongolian invasion, Han invasion, Genghis Khan invasion of Japan, they actually win by filling their fleet. The Japanese, the samurai, fill their fleets with pitch, light their fleets on fire, oil burning.
Okay, flammable.
Flammable materials. They burn their own boats and shove their burning boats at the invading fleet, which destroys a good chunk of them. And then they get really lucky with a hurricane that takes
that's nice.
The rest of them.
It's always nice when God comes in and is like, "Oh, I'm gonna pick who wins with a hurricane."
And there's nothing wrong with that tactic because you're human beings and you want to survive. So yeah, ranged weapons work. Shady sabotage tactics work. Yeah. Whatever it takes for less of my people to die, so more of your people die, I'm okay with it.
If the samurai truly did stand by their no man retreats
they would have been gone.
And everything else, we would not know about the samurai. They would have been a very small fighting class that went and died in a battle.
Very, very quickly. Very, very quickly.
It got wiped out easily and taken over, and that's it.
To put in perspective on why they had to fight shadily, the first invasion took off in 1274. It took off at the northern part of Japan, with the Mongols bringing 40,000 men and 900 ships against the 10,000 samurai that were mustered.
Holy shit.
So, yeah, you're going to have to come up with something to beat those numbers.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know earlier I said that Japan's an easy place to defend because it's an island, but when it's 4-1...
Yeah, 4-1 makes it a little bit different.
Even you could have all the advantages in the world, and that's still going to be a tough fight.
And that's the other big difference between knights, feudal knights, which were a royal noble class that you had to be born into, versus samurai. Knights in our feudal system was like a very minute population of the army. You'd have
a
handful of knights for a bunch of you'd have a handful of knights leading a peasant army.
It was sort of like having a class that was generals.
Yes, yeah.
If you had to be born into your general class or whatever, Robert Lee's kids could be generals, but nobody else. That's essentially what the knights were.
Yeah, and then of course you're in Japan. The samurai actually made up a substantial portion of the army, if not the majority of the army was samurai fighters. So, like I said, burning pitch boats that gets rid of the whole first invasion. In between the first and second invasion, the samurai class was like, or the shogunate, the Kamakura shogunate was like, they're probably coming back.
I mean, it's not going to be a one-time one. They're not going to be like, we'll try it with 40,000 men.
Yeah,
and so if they wanted to just check it out, they would have sent a boat.
Yeah, they would have sent a boat.
They want to conquer this shit.
They're going to come back. So they build a huge wall called the Great Stone Barrier at Hakata Bay in 1277. And then they also start to adopt the Huns' weapons, including gunpowder, because the Huns come over with bombs and cannons, and they're like, "That's cool. We like that. Let's adopt that."
Now, this is the 1200s.
Not Last Samurai bullshit, where they're like, "We don't dishonor ourselves anymore by using guns."
That'll kill people better.
That'll kill people better from farther. Yeah, they adopt that.
Okay, so gunpowder got there in the 1200s.
Yes,
is
primitive
that
gunpowder.
where?
Yes,
right. But is that where it got everywhere? Was that?
No. So gunpowder comes around in China in the early 1200s. It gets developed into like rockets, bombs, and then very, very primitive hand cannons come out in the late 1200s.
So what they had now, though, was essentially just they found, hey, this shit blows up. I'm going to put it together and make it on fire and chuck it at somebody.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. And so the second invasion kicks off around 1277, and yet again, a hurricane knocks out the Chinese Huan fleet. And mission accomplished.
You know what? You want to know what? I feel like by the 1200s, they should know what hurricane season is. And maybe not travel during that and try to attack during hurricane season. Like, it can't have been the first two hurricanes ever to happen in that area. You know what I mean?
It would have made for a hell of a lot worse of a video game if Ghost of Tsushima was like hurricane.
You win.
Doesn't matter what you did. You won.
Hey.
There we go. But they, like I said, they did successfully, defend against these invasions, and because they successfully invaded or defended against these invasions, the samurai image would become hardened in Japan. Like the samurai.
They turned away 40,000 troops, and then another however many, probably a similar type of attack twice.
Yeah, but then
what great, brilliant warriors they are.
Yeah, but then infighting took over pretty much quickly right afterwards, and after the second invasion was successfully defended, the Kamakura shogunate dissolves, and that's the end of the first era of the Japanese samurai.
That's it for this week in Historic Hindsight. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review, and join us next week when we talk about India Pale Ales.